Thank you for tuning in to the Inquisitive Man podcast. This week's guest is Rhodes Pierre, comedian, life insurance agent, ordained minister, and more importantly, the reason why you're on here today, marijuana advocate.
Absolutely.
Yes, folks, today's the marijuana episode.
Well, I hope one of the many marijuana episodes. I mean, it's not that complex of an issue, but, you know.
No, we're not going full Joe Rogan today.
No.
I don't have anything here, so.
Oh, okay. Well, that's, either way, I'm here. I'm pro marijuana advocate, whether the marijuana is available or not.
So, Rhodes Pierre, I know you pretty well,
Yes.
but the people listening probably don't know much about you. You're a stand-up comedian.
That is correct.
You and I have done some comedy together. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and about the different things that you do.
All right, I can definitely talk for a while, but about myself, child of like Haitian immigrants' parents. I've lived in the U.S., lived in Montreal, lived in Haiti, traveled, college graduate, been a teacher, brand ambassador, debate coach, mayoral assistant. I've done many different things, and so what got me into marijuana advocacy is I guess my college days when I actually found out that marijuana was a plant. That's when I was like, how is a plant illegal?
So you didn't know that marijuana was a plant before you were in college? What did you think it was?
Because literally all the TV shows, I'd see people smoking it, like the joints or whatever. Like I never actually saw marijuana because I'd only see people smoking joints. So I knew it was a funny, wacky, and I didn't even know it was marijuana. Because my first exposure to it was riding the public bus in the morning, and as a kid, your parents would tell you, sit in the front of the bus, go to school, sit in the front of the bus, take your transfer. So every morning, literally, one or two people, one person would spark up a joint in the back of the bus, and the bus driver would be like, yo, stop that reefer smoking back there. He'd stop the bus. He'd have to put it up, be like, whatever. He wouldn't really kick anyone off the bus, but it would smell up the whole bus.
So people would actually smoke weed on your bus ride?
Yeah.
I'm assuming this was a regular public bus, not
on the MBTA, dude. Yeah. What grade was I in? I believe I was either in 5th grade or 6th grade. Yeah. I distinctly remember people because in 4th grade I used to get a ride with my uncle to school, but 5th and 6th grade, that's when I started taking the bus, and yeah.
So this experience that you had as a child, kind of left an imprint in your mind about what marijuana was, and so you weren't really sure about what exactly it was until you got a little bit older.
Exactly.
So why don't you tell us a little bit, what is marijuana?
Well, marijuana is a plant, the cannabis, sativa, indica hybrids. There are different strains of it, but basically it's the cousin or related to hemp as well. And what it is, these are two plants that naturally grow on the planet. They're part of the environment, and hemp can be used for many different purposes, from being used for food, fuel, and fiber. And so a lot of things used to be made from hemp.
Hemp rope?
Yes, hemp rope,
yeah.
Cloth, the navies, the clothing.
Yeah.
But also the Constitution, ironically, is written on hemp paper. So,
are you trying to say that the founding fathers were sitting around rolling one?
I will say that they partook. If they would, I think they would bless and say that it's something that God put on the planet for us to use. They wouldn't be adverse to it. They wouldn't be put people in jail for using it.
I have read that marijuana used to cover basically the entirety of the United States. It was very common.
Yes.
Because it grows naturally and it grows very easily on its own. It's a weed. So it just grows.
Exactly.
And there were efforts made by the federal government to eradicate a lot of the wild plants at some point, when it became illegal.
Yeah, but look, the federal government's never been really good And it's unfortunate because we blame the federal government, and it's like it's the government, but again, it's the people that elect the government into office. So, but yes, as far as like having the federal government manage things, they kind of like mess things up a lot of times. But bottom line is, it's like they mess it up because the politicians go in there and do their quagmiring or whatever you'd like to. They put their little 2 cents in. Like they shouldn't politicize things like the EPA. It shouldn't put climate change and control or whatever. Should not be politicized. It's science. It should be based on science, not on opinions. And so, like the idea that the Native Americans, they wiped out all the buffaloes to kind of, and that eradicated their culture in that sense. And so, no, the federal government has not had like a good track record of like, doing the best thing as far as like, let's kind of like just tweak this a little bit just to help out people. And it's like, and the thing is, it doesn't serve everyone. It tries to serve like corporate or the interests of the people in power.
So who were the people, who had an interest in eradicating marijuana?
Originally, the corporations, from the cotton industry to the oil industry, but the oil industry wasn't until much later. The paper industry, it's documented that William H. Hearst, who was like the Rupert Murdoch Fox of his day, but it was through journalism. Because again, back then it wasn't the radio and television that proliferated American media, the landscape. It was newspapers. So he had the cheap newspapers throughout the country. Again, reason why we have monopoly laws. So one person can't control all of these people's opinions. So, but William H. Hearst had developed or owned a patent to turn tree pulp to paper. And his biggest competition at the time was hemp. And he was like, well...
So you're saying that paper lobbyists basically were responsible for...
One of the many reasons why, yes, that hemp and marijuana. Because he's the one that drove the campaign to actually make marijuana seem like it's an evil, wacky tobacco. And he kept
Reefer Madness,
perpetuating that, people smoke it, they go crazy, they'll attack or rape women, and of course, like, back then, it's like, because of the lynchings and all the back, it wasn't true. It was just something that was perpetuated as a lie that really wasn't true.
So I'm going to ask you about, the pros and the cons in a little bit, but before we get into that, I'd like to ask you how you got into, advocacy. You talked about how you got introduced to it in college or university days, and that's how you...
Yeah, in college, that's when I literally got introduced to marijuana. It was at work. After work, it was like around midnight. I worked at Domino's Pizza, like the shift manager.
Seems like the perfect place to spark up for the first time.
It is, my friend. I will tell you, it was very nice. I was after work, done counting the money, putting everything away, stores cleaned up. Like the boss, bought some beers, he's like, hey, whatever, there's tip money at the end of the night, so it gives you your tip money too. Actually, no, the drivers got tip money. We were door people. We didn't get tip money. We were just kind of like handed them their tip money. And so obviously we can't smoke inside the store. So even though the store is closed, you never know who can walk in or whatever, but whatever. So he goes out and he sparks a joint. He's like, do you partake? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And it was just kind of like one of those things, because it's like I knew I smelt it before or whatever. And I was like, well, this is my boss, you know what I mean? Like, I've been working for this guy for a couple of months, and he smokes weed,
So you got peer pressured by your boss into smoking weed?
I wouldn't say peer pressured. It was just kind of like I was willing to try. It wasn't like if he had said, "Did you want some?" I could have easily said no. I was definitely, curious.
And so, how did your experience, smoking weed with him, lead to you becoming an advocate for marijuana?
Well, it was just the idea that all the things that I'd heard from it before, because I'd done part of the DARE program. I was I had perfect attendance in high school. Like, it was just like, I was definitely like anti-drugs. I was definitely like anti-drugs. I mean, I guess like with the DARE program, I could say, because I was indoctrinated with it, I was definitely like, okay, I'm not doing this drug or doing that drug or whatever. But there were some drugs that I was kind of like, oh, that doesn't sound like that bad. Like, what's wrong with feeling happy and being hungry and, going to sleep once in a while? Like, yes, not doing it while you're driving or whatever, but no, it was definitely one of those things. Like, I was like, all right, it didn't feel bad at first. Like, I got caught with my parents. My parents busted me, and they kind of freaked out, but they didn't know I got it from work because they thought I got it on the street. I was like, I got it on the street, and they were like, so they let me go back to work, and it was just funny, like, whatever. It is what it is. But
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the decriminalization of marijuana? I know that you were involved, advocating for decriminalization in Massachusetts, and it's been decriminalized in several states while it's still illegal federally.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me and tell us a little bit about the work that you've done advocating for it,
Yes.
and what you believe about it. So why do you advocate for it?
Well,
what do you believe about it, and what have you done?
Okay, what I believe about it is like it's part of Mother Nature, and our ancestors have gotten it right. And the reason why I advocate for it is the fact that it's part of Mother Nature. Like, we shouldn't be fighting our earth, our home. So the reason why I believe in it is the fact that it's here, and anything that could kill you or hurt you, our ancestors put the word poison in front of it. Poison oak, poison sumac, poison ivy. You smoke any of those, you partake in them, like you rub them, you have an allergic reaction. If you smoke it, you end up in the hospital for days or weeks or even die. So they didn't put the word poison in front of marijuana. And it's one of the only things that I've noticed that as far as like being propagated against, like, oh no, it's bad, it'll kill you. It didn't kill me. So that I was like, why would the government lie to me?
I haven't really heard a lot of people say that it will kill you, but I have heard people talk about it being a gateway drug, basically that, marijuana, while not very harmful on its own, or not particularly harmful on its own, people don't really overdose from marijuana,
Yes.
but there are other side effects caused by it.
Absolutely. I would agree on that point.
I read some statistics before I invited you on, in states like Washington and Colorado, after it's been legalized, some of the people who argue against the decriminalization have cited statistics, basically, like some of the adverse side effects of decriminalization in those states. So, for instance, there's been an increase in hospitalization related to marijuana. I don't know.
I think that's to be expected, because
And-
now it's legal. People are going more out in the open and try it and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, it was also driving under the influence.
Okay. No.
So
yeah,
people driving, maybe if they're too high, they shouldn't be driving.
absolutely.
There's also been a spike in teenagers using marijuana because of the fact that it's now decriminalized in those states. So those are some of the adverse effects of decriminalization that I've read about.
Okay.
Well, I'm personally very libertarian on the issue. I think that it's not really the government's business if you want to smoke marijuana. I just don't think that it's really their place to say anything about it. I think if you want to do it, that's your business.
Yep.
If you're out there driving and you're stoned and you hit somebody in an accident, well, then that's a problem.
Understood.
But if you're minding your own business and you want to light up a joint in your house and smoke, I don't give a crap. It's none of my business.
No.
And that's how I look at it.
No, and that's the thing. I think like the if they treated just like alcohol, prohibition didn't work with alcohol, and
No.
we've learned our lesson with that, and that's the same thing we should do with marijuana.
I don't think prohibitions work in general.
Exactly.
Any prohibition that the government has ever tried to enforce hasn't really worked out.
Okay.
I mean, you have a prohibition when abortion was illegal. People did it anyway.
Yeah.
When alcohol was prohibited, people did it anyway. Marijuana, people have been smoking marijuana.
Yes.
It's not like people just stopped because it was legal.
Yeah.
In fact, it probably gained. I don't have any data to back this up, but I would imagine that marijuana smoking probably increased like during the hippie movement and stuff during the 60s and 70s when, overall drug use was higher.
I will say that because of counterculture, and they were like actually going against what was told to them, against the 1950s culture. So the 1960s culture was the rock and roll rebellion, but again, it was like much later. I mean, I wasn't born then. I didn't actually live at that era. I mean, I do look old. And
There might have also been an influence with the introduction of like reggae. I know, like, there were a lot of people in the U.S. who liked, for instance, Bob Marley. I think there's been some jokes I've read about it, as far as a bunch of white people who were into reggae or they were into Bob Marley and the whole weed smoking thing. But I think a lot of people may have been introduced due to that culture.
I'm not sure exactly like how marijuana got reintroduced to the culture, the counterculture of the 1960s. But I do know the fact that prohibition, as I was saying, doesn't work. What it does is create a black market. And the essence of like, like people were drinking beforehand, and when you made alcohol illegal, all you did was make them go drink underground. And so the thing with marijuana, it's like people were using it anyway. And 78% of all of our medicine before 1937, before the Marijuana Tax Act was pushed in by Salinger, I think 70 to 78% of all of our pharmaceuticals contain cannabis as one of its main ingredients. So it was being used before, and when they made it illegal, they actually did not ask the American Medical Society or the pharmacists. They essentially made it illegal, like I think during a winter session, and they weren't all the senators were there. Most of the senators had gone home for winter break for Christmas. And they've tacked on hemp at the last minute. They made this big propaganda program against marijuana, Salinger, and Hearst, because they had coordinated. Because Salinger, because prohibition of alcohol was ending, his budget was going to be done. So the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, whatever the organization that he was heading or the head of, was going to be dissolved because alcohol is now legal. You don't need the alcohol people anymore to enforce the alcohol laws because alcohol is legal. So his main motivation was like to keep his job, was like, let's make marijuana illegal and go after the Hispanic and the African Americans at the time. And the first town to actually pass an anti-marijuana law was somewhere in Texas. And they just basically said they didn't want the people smoking their wacky tobacco because the Mexicans were smoking this. And again, same thing was during the Great Depression, during the Depression era. So they were saying that Mexicans were coming up here to take the jobs that Americans themselves wouldn't do. But yet they're coming here to take our jobs. They're like, well, you're not. If you don't want to do it and they can do it, well, so.
So what you're saying is that government agencies have an incentive to try to use the money or use the funding that they have so that they keep their jobs.
Absolutely. Government is in business to keep itself in business. Just remember that. Government 101. So they're never going to ever shut down a department or ever say, okay, it's done. We've cured a disease or we no longer need this department. They're always going to create more bureaucracy.
Well, I've always said that government agencies don't have any incentive to be efficient with their money, because if
there's no competition.
If they don't spend it, then they lose it. And so if you run a government agency, I know people who have worked for different government bureaucracies and different departments and agencies and things like that. And if they get a certain budget, a lot of times the people making all the money are the people on the top, the administrators or the people in charge, and the people on the lower end are not really making very good money. And they tend to be run poorly because they don't care, and like you said, they don't have competition. That's a conversation for another day.
Yes, absolutely.
As far as so you're saying that the government decided to take the money that they were allocating to fight against the alcohol.
And moved it to marijuana.
And moved it over to the prohibition of marijuana.
Prohibition of marijuana because one, it was considered or associated with Hispanics and African Americans. Because with the prohibition, it was all their own kids, the white kids that they were putting in jail because of the speakeasies or what have you. So with this, because of the racial element, it was a lot easier for them to justify that, hey, we're doing this. It's not affecting it because the white kids aren't smoking marijuana.
Because, black and Hispanic people in the country being a minority, if you have the majority, not being affected by it, they kind of turn a blind eye. Is what you're saying.
Exactly.
So they didn't care about it because their kids weren't the ones smoking marijuana or being punished for it.
Put in jail for being arrested. just like today, just like
So if what you're saying is true,
yes.
then why is it still illegal federally?
Again, government's not going to put itself out of business. They're never going to say, okay. And when's the last time the government actually admitted that they made a mistake? Like, asbestos, lead.
Sure, if I really wanted to find an instance, I could.
No.
Well, no, I don't know.
No. They don't easily apologize.
They have in some instances.
Yes.
There's been changes to our Constitution because of mistakes the government has made, and it's taken a civil war to rectify one of them.
Yeah.
So,
but again, it's still not rectified. It's like kind of like we did it on paper, but in reality, it's still an ongoing issue. Where the armed forces or law enforcement officers, quote unquote, are scared of their lives. I'm like, then why did you take the job? Like, I thought that was the point of having the badge and the gun, so you wouldn't be scared.
I do think that it's important to have a good process to screen people who are going to be in law enforcement. I can't speak because I don't know a lot about it. I can't really say too much about it. I do have family members who have worked in law enforcement, and I don't know a lot about the process they go through as far as training. But I do think it's important that they have not only they go through a physical process, because obviously they're tested for their physical capabilities.
Absolutely.
They have to pass a physical fitness test, and they have to pass written exams in order to become a police officer. But I think it's also important to make sure that you're not putting somebody on the police force who has any sort of strong bias like that, or at least has a strong bias that's going to interfere with...
Well, I think they should just do psychological testing, and it shouldn't just be a 6 to 8 week course. In other countries, it's like 2 to 4 years before you can even to become a prison guard. In this country, it's like 8 weeks, and you become a prison guard. And we have the highest rate of recidivism compared to any other industrialized nation, where the prison military industrial complex, they're trying to privatize it because they see it as a way of making money. If it was really about rehabilitating, what incentive, how do you get incentivized to be like, I want to own a prison, I want to make, because again,
yeah. And as somebody who's very libertarian on most issues, I do think that the government's role should be limited in many things,
yes.
But I do think that the criminal justice system is something that the government should have control over.
Absolutely. It should not be privatized. I totally agree with you on that part.
I do think that a lot of things...
Money should not be a motive for you to be
right. I do
punishing people.
I do think that, in most instances, things are better off in the hands of private individuals and private citizens and private businesses. However, when it comes to the criminal justice system, it doesn't make sense to me that you have private prisons run for profit. I think that because you're creating an incentive for them to put people in jail because they're getting money for those people.
Exactly.
It's actually...
And it's funny to me that also is the fact that if the prison, it takes $70,000 a year to house a prisoner, but yet it's only $30,000 to give them a grade 8 education. Wouldn't it be more of an investment to give all the students the best education that you can, so that way you don't have to have the prison? I guess there's an incentive to keep the dumbing down of America, because it's, how does it make sense for you to spend $70,000 per prisoner?
Well, I think that's it's kind of complicated. I don't think that's a very black or white issue. The reason being is because depending on the part of the country that you're in the school district, the amount of spending is that they spend per area is very different.
Absolutely.
So you can't, if you want to look at the nation as a whole, it's hard to generalize. And
no, but you can generalize with that statistic.
The United States spends more per student than any other country.
Well, we spend more money on prisoners than we do the students. And I think if an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of medicine.
Well, I was going to say that I think that speaks to that we're not doing a good job. If we're spending more money per student than any other country, obviously it varies depending on the district.
Absolutely.
But I think that speaks to it speaks that they're not doing something right. That we're giving you all this money, but you're not spending it in an efficient way.
I'll tell you something right now. I grew up, like I said, in Montreal. I went to school. I was born here in Boston, but I went to I lived in Haiti for a while. And
Yeah.
the early educational system there, I don't really remember, but I have pictures to prove that it was there. So it was like, all right, that kind of embedded in my memory, but maybe I'm trying to block it out. But anyway, I went to school in Montreal, and from kindergarten to third grade, what I heard of Montreal was when you graduate from college, when you become a citizen, when you become an adult, a member of society. I moved to the United States of America because that's where I was born and my parents are here. Well, my dad was here. My mom was living with us in Montreal. But we moved back here, 4th grade all the way to 12th grade. But thank God I was pre-programmed to think I was going to college, to know I was going to college. I didn't know how I was going, but I just, in the back of my head, I was going to college. But all I heard was when I moved to the U.S. was if you graduate from high school. If you graduate from high school. I'm like, that's the level, the bar of just accomplishment level is set very low here. So it's acceptable.
That may be true. That's obviously, that's anecdotal, so that's your experience. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like if that's common everywhere in the United States, and
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember if teachers and administrators that I spoke to in high school spoke that way.
Yeah.
So that's not something that I really have recollection of. But if that's your experience, I mean, I guess that it makes sense. You're saying that in your mind there's a difference of culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're saying in a place like Canada or Montreal specifically, they're setting the bar higher as far as what you're going to achieve. They don't speak as ifs; it's when.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, give my parents credit because they are the ones that actually, like at home, they're the primary people that like reinforce education, how important it was. Like, don't you get in trouble in school? Make sure you're doing your schoolwork. That education is something that you should take very seriously. And then they talked about their struggles growing up as kids. He's like going like we didn't have electricity, we didn't have the lights, so it's like we'd have to go under the regular street light that they had in the neighborhood to do their homework and study because they had to help on the farm right after school and stuff. So it was like they talked about the fact that you have a privilege, the fact that you have an education to take advantage of it and not to take it for granted and stuff. So that was like another, primary push and stuff. But you're right. That's not everyone's experience. But one of the things I do remember is like busing in the 70s, and in 3rd grade when we were bused from Mattapan to Rosendale in Massachusetts. So this was a way for them to do the integration of the schools, like remember how they tried to integrate the schools so they weren't segregated? So they take students from different neighborhoods and send them to different schools in other neighborhoods.
I'm familiar with it, but I honestly don't know a ton about it.
So that was one of the things that they did. So people were protesting on the street as the bus drove by. People had signs.
I'd heard stuff about South Boston.
Yeah.
At some point, that in South Boston they had
Hyde
issues
Park,
with
West Roxbury and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they had issues there as well. So I remember we were like, our bus was crossing a bridge, but the point of them to integrate the schools was so the students would interact. And the mission of that was such an utter failure because what they would do is actually send an entire grade, and the grade would have a separate, it was 2nd and 3rd grade for in our case. And so 4th and 5th went to another school. So they take different kids from different neighborhoods and go to different schools and bring them. So the whole classroom would actually go. So they would literally take the whole classroom, and you'd have a separate entrance, separate lunch, separate recess. So the whole idea of having the black kids and the white kids interact never occurred.
Yeah.
Because although we went into school in the same building, they made sure that we didn't have lunch together, we didn't have recess together, we didn't do no assemblies together. It was just kind of like, all right, you're going to school here, but we're going to make sure you guys are like, not... and interacting with each other.
It's very interesting that you talk about your experience there because I grew up, when I went to school, it was a very different time period. Even though it's maybe only 30 years later.
Yeah.
But when I went to school, I didn't know about any of these sort of things when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
I didn't know about segregation and all these things that had existed in the past.
Yeah.
So to me, like, I'm coming from a different frame of mind, I guess, because my experiences have been different. So for you experienced that, but for me, looking back as a kid, it's hard to imagine that because when I was a kid, I never would have pictured it any other way. because I went to school with all different kinds of people, and I never looked at them as being different. You know, like I went to school with black kids. I went to school with looking back, there was a girl I went to school with who was Middle Eastern. I didn't even know she was Middle Eastern. Like, I didn't know. I just knew they were kids. They were people I was friends with and people I went to school with. Mm-hmm. So it's weird that, you know, thinking about the way that you grow up and how it impacts you and how it impacts how you think. Mm-hmm. Because when I think back to my childhood and I look back, like, I can't imagine going to school and being in a situation where everything's segregated because it was never like that for me.
Okay.
And
no, and that's the thing.
It's just interesting to think about.
Like, that was third grade and fourth grade, and then, no, that was third grade, and then, by the time I got to high school, I went to Mount Pleasant High right here in Providence. Yeah. And that was like a very diverse, well-mixed school. We had Laos, we had black, white, Hispanic, we had Dominican. I was Haitian, you know what I mean? So, and those classrooms weren't segregated. Like, it was like a mix of everyone in every classroom. Yeah. So, like, again, like as a kid, it was just kind of crazy that, you know, that was a mission, but they kept the classrooms all separated.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. No, that's the plan at the time. The administration, that's what they wanted to do. You know, so.
I'm guessing they had some sort of justification or some reason that they tried to do it that way, but it's hard to think of what that might be. Yeah. Maybe they were trying to avoid fighting. I don't know.
But it's like we're like third graders. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So I don't think we were much into fighting. It was just kind of like, and I remember this more like as an adult, because as a kid you just there to go to school.
You didn't really care.
You didn't really care. You just interacting with the kids in the classroom and stuff.
But I'm just thinking back. It makes me wonder, like, if it's not something I've really thought about before, but because I grew up in, during a time where schools were mixed and everything like that, that I never really thought about it. And when like I look at people and I talk to people, it doesn't click with me. Like, I don't look at people that way. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if my upbringing, because I didn't go through the same things that you went through, if that is why when I look, I don't care much about people's background as far as like how I look at them and how I treat them. I just care about like your Rhodes, you're a good person, you're a nice guy. Like, I don't care about skin color and ethnic background and things like that. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. No, and it shouldn't. I mean, we're deep, like underneath the skin. We're basically all the same, same parts. We bleed the same way or whatever.
But because of your experience, what I'm trying to say is, you actually experienced some of that stuff as a kid, mm-hmm. so your perspective on it is probably different. Also, the fact that you're black, but
that definitely makes a different perspective on different things. Yeah.
So your perspective is different for that reason, but also because of those experiences where if I had gone to a school and experienced what you experienced, but on the other side, I would probably look at things a little different as well, retrospectively.
I can imagine. Like I said, it wasn't until I was an adult that I thought about that. I was like, we went to that school, but we only had recess and lunch with just all the other kids from the neighborhood.
When I think about segregation, right, I think about it being a long, long time ago. But for you, it wasn't.
No,
because when I was a little kid, that really didn't exist. Yeah. You're a little bit older than me, but it's weird to think that you're not that much older than me, but you experienced some of that. Whereas when I was a kid, it never existed for me.
Yeah. No, and so I'm glad that it kind of improved in that sense that, you grew up in the fact that it wasn't prevalent and it didn't exist anymore.
I never even knew it existed until I got older. And you learn about that stuff, like, taking classes in history or reading, you learn about stuff that happened. But for me, when I look back, I'm thinking, oh, that was a long time ago. Nobody acts like that now. And maybe I'm a little bit naive sometimes. And I tend to be optimistic. I try to think that most people are good-hearted and good in nature. But
I literally was the same way, until literally when, after this last election, let's just say I was kind of said, okay, I realized what this country, kind of put into perspective a lot of things about the powers that be, the agendas of what people feel is more important to them, and so it's eye opening to we've evolved, but to the point where it's like you take one step forward and then you take two steps back. So it's
well, progress and change can be slow,
yeah,
but
they always
that's it's part of the reason why I'm trying to do this show is because I believe it's important to have conversations, and I don't think that fighting with people is gonna help anything.
I agree. My whole thing is like when I feel
the way that people overcome bigotry or bias or prejudice is by experiencing and by talking to people and by having conversations, right?
Yeah, no, but why does it even exist in the first place? Like, why does it even
tribalism? People are tribal by nature.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that we can try to eradicate them. Because when you're saying when people are fighting, I feel like that's another issue is the fact that we still use violence to try to get our point across.
Yeah.
As far as like being like quote unquote humans, if we've evolved to the point where it's like we shouldn't be using might makes right as logic to win an argument. Like, hey, my army is strong, or my police force, or my whatever. Like, it shouldn't be like my physical strength.
Well, that's why when I had Tom on last time, we talked briefly about Antifa and whatever you think or feel about them. I don't condone the fact that they try to use violence. They hit people and they try to intimidate people with violence. And so even if I don't personally agree with them, but even if you do agree with them on some of their political points that they try to make, or agree with some of the whatever their philosophy is, anarcho-communist,
violence,
because of the fact that they're going around hitting people and throwing rocks at people and lighting things on fire, that's why I don't take them seriously.
Well, you got to take them seriously because
take them seriously in the sense that they're out there, but I don't have respect for them because they're out there attacking people. But we got a little bit off topic from the marijuana.
Marijuana thing, yes.
I would still like to ask you a few questions about marijuana.
Go ahead.
So, you didn't really tell me too much about your work doing advocating.
Okay.
So tell me about what you've done as far as advocacy.
As far as advocacy, I got involved with them by going to the political Yes on 4 campaign, helping
Massachusetts,
yes. And
I voted yes.
Excellent. Glad you did. And I also worked at Canacare Docs, which is owned by Medivalve, and I think now a French company or a Canadian company bought them. But they're still called Canacare Docs, and that was part of it, was like getting people their license to get medical marijuana and educating them to the laws, to marijuana and the effects of it and what it can do and the benefits and the fact that hemp is around, and just to reassured them that this was a good thing and that they shouldn't be believing the propaganda of the government of saying that this is bad, it's going to kill you.
It's interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
So I know obviously you're an advocate and you're pro marijuana.
Yes.
But you do also acknowledge that there's negative consequences and the side effects from smoking marijuana, taking marijuana.
Like everything in moderation.
Obviously, smoking anything is not necessarily good for your lungs.
Yeah, but
true. Besides the impact on your lungs is in inhaling it, there's documented evidence of how it affects your brain, and the constant stimulation of dopamine in the brain.
No, absolutely. But it affects everyone differently and individually, and it's up to the person to know.
And there have been studies that show long-term effects of marijuana as far as affecting your memory, like short-term, long-term memory.
But your mind or your body, whatever, will adapt. So it's like even if just like the part of your survival instincts is being able to be adaptable. So the long-term effects, I think, kind of like are depending on who did the study. Like some people say it affects the person adversely. Other people say there's no like bad or.
So what do you think are the
long-term effects?
The biggest negatives when it comes to marijuana use? What are the downsides?
The downside is the fact that it's illegal. That it's that's literally the downside of it, is the fact that it's illegal, and that's like perpetuates not only the police, the fact that it's perpetuating the black market, it's perpetuating like a selective enforcement with the justice system. The fact is that white and black people smoke marijuana at the same rate, but yet black and Hispanics, the minorities, make up like 70% of the people in jail for those crimes. So it's not that they smoke 70 times more than white people. It's just the fact that it's a lot easier for the police person to go into a neighborhood that people don't look like him, and he doesn't care that he's affecting a whole family or anything like that. And it's like it's an easy possession thing to get. Like white collar crimes are harder to prove, longer to do detective work, but more people lose more money through white collar crimes than they do through.
My personal opinion is that it's a waste of time to throw people in jail for marijuana. Well, not just a waste of time, but a waste of money.
Yeah.
So as somebody who pays taxes, I would rather my tax money be used for something else besides throwing people in jail for marijuana.
I mean, put people away that are actually endanger other people's lives, like, you know.
But I meant health, negative effects on your health for smoking marijuana.
The thing I will say is this: that I mean, they're using it right now. They've done research for it to know that it cures cancer. It has cannabinoids, and it's the THC is the thing that gets you high. That has a psycho.
I don't think there's any concrete evidence that it cures cancer. I think that it may be good as far as helping to treat cancer, and I do think there's a lot of potential medical uses. I know, like, personally, people who have different, who use it for medical reasons.
Absolutely.
So, for instance, I have family members who have things like Parkinson's or chronic pain, joint pain, things like that. And
well,
it helps.
I mean, the reason why it became popular again in the medical community is because of AIDS, HIV, and a lot of people in the gay community, like when they got sick or they got the AIDS, well, HIV virus, they would use marijuana, and that increased their appetite, and they kept their weight up and got them to feel better and stuff. So a lot of that advocacy to turn it to look at it more as medicine came from that community and the experience with it.
I haven't heard that before, so that's interesting. I haven't heard that. I mean, I knew that they were using it for different medical reasons because of certain things, but I hadn't heard that one before.
Then that's why a lot of people didn't. People with cancer and then the people with epilepsy, they got, those communities. They talk different. I guess the different communities of people that are suffering from chronic diseases will talk to one another and see what's working in their communities.
So, is it fair to say that you think that marijuana should be decriminalized across the board federally?
Absolutely. I think it should be treated as a plant. It should be regulated like a tomato plant, like a wheat, like a barley. Same kind of regulation. Just make sure doesn't have any mold, doesn't have any poison, and it's taken care of. You think that it should be okay for people to use it recreationally, but also for medicinal purposes? Absolutely. People are grown up enough to handle alcohol. Do you think people should have to get a prescription for it? No, they don't get a prescription for guns or alcohol or tobacco. Oh, but you need a license to get a gun, and you need you have to have some sort of identification to buy cigarettes for the most part. For alcohol. Well, same thing with alcohol. With a gun, I understand you do, like, you get a background check or what have you. Yeah. But it's required by federal law to have a background check. But do you understand that right now, federally, that if you have a medical marijuana card, that you will be denied a firearm. But yet, even if you're documented as being psychologically some sort of, like, whatever, some sort of psychological episode, that you still can go out and get a gun. Yeah, it depends on the state. Yeah. Federally, maybe, but there are certain states that have, laws on the books. Yeah. And then you're more like, again, guns kill people, but yet guns and firearms are still legal. No one's saying we're going to make all guns illegal, but guns definitely kill people, and that's the only purpose, kill or injure people. So you can't, the whole reason why marijuana should be legal is, again, like I said, it's part of Mother Nature, and you can't convince me otherwise. Are there any other drugs that you would decriminalize? Mushrooms. Yeah. And then, all the other ones, they definitely have, like everything in moderation. I just feel like people should be treated as adults and.
See, I don't advocate for smoking marijuana. I don't advocate for doing mushrooms or any other drug. But I don't have a problem with people. I don't think that it's a criminal act. Yeah. Is where I have an issue with it. I don't think that it's really the government's business if you want to do those things.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that people should go out and, do mushrooms. And I think that if it becomes too commonplace, like you've seen in the States where they've decriminalized marijuana and usage rates have gone up, that there's also been an increase in teenagers using marijuana. I think if you decriminalize other drugs, there will be an increase in usage as well.
I'm going to first of all kind of like negate the fact that you said that those are things that reports that you cited, but again, it hasn't come back to actually say that. I won't agree with the fact that you're saying that all the states that it's been decriminalized.
Well,
that everything
the main two are Washington and Colorado.
Okay, so those are like either one-sided or preliminary arguments, because I don't know for a fact like where those numbers came from, what they put into what numbers or
this particular stat comes from a report from Colorado, Alaska, and
who did the report, and was it a conservative think tank?
No,
because I mean, like if it's a Pew Charitable Trust Fund or one of those kind of like surveys, then I'll be able to trust it.
You can find data to back up pretty much any opinion.
Yeah,
but
that is true.
This particular report, I don't have all the information in front of me right now, but it cited 12 to 17-year-olds using marijuana is higher in every legal marijuana state than the national average. For example, 16.21% of Colorado teens and 18.86% of teens in Alaska reported marijuana use in the past year, compared to an average of 12.29% for the United States overall in 2015 and 2016. Colorado past month teen marijuana use jumped 20% in the 2-year average after marijuana was legalized for adults. I could get you the source for that if you like. I don't have it with me right now.
Okay. Yeah, no, but again, like my whole thing is like, especially with some of these reports, is you got to understand the people that are backing the reports have invested interests in the outcome of those reports. Like, oh yes, like teenage use has gone up, so therefore we should keep it decriminalized. I mean, the police.
Well, let's say it's true. If it was true, let's say that the report was true, even if it's wrong. Let's be hypothetical.
Yes.
So hypothetically, if use has gone up among teens because it's legal now, which is not really a big leap to make it, I don't think. Would you still feel the same about legalizing, let's say, mushrooms, do you think? Now, there are potential harmful effects, according to different doctors out there, on the development of the brain.
Well, the mushrooms...
Your brain doesn't stop developing or growing until you're about 25. So that's one of the reasons why doctors don't think it's wise for teenagers and young adults to do certain drugs like mushrooms or marijuana, because it can interfere with the development of your brain.
Understood, and I would agree with
alcohol
doctors.
too, though.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll agree with that and that part with the doctors and stuff. But my thing is, it's like if it's something, everything's in moderation, and they've actually found some benefits to it, like as far as like treating people that are suffering from depression, anxiety. If they're doing microdosing with mushrooms, it's proven to be something that really affects them. I mean, and the thing is, they should try other things, alternative things, like get a therapy dog or something, or get some, like if people are suffering from anxiety, depression, or whatever, medication shouldn't be the first thing they should try. They should go for a walk, exercise, or something.
I agree with you there. I think that too many people are quick to jump into prescription.
Yeah.
And I do think that, let's say, for instance, marijuana, not smoking it, but maybe ingesting it by other means, may be better for you health-wise versus a lot of prescription drugs, which have harmful effects on your liver and other parts of your body. So if you take prescription drugs for anxiety, for instance, they actually are filtered through your liver, and it can cause liver damage over time, especially if you're taking an antidepressant and drinking or doing something else. Whereas, to my knowledge, marijuana doesn't really have any long-term negative effects on your liver, or at least not any major ones, compared to the damage that taking certain opiates, but also certain prescription antidepressants. Yes. Which I think are overprescribed, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but I think that
No, that's definitely something that is definitely happening with this country. That we're so overprescribed that traces of all medication now are found in all major sources of drinking water. So that people
are you saying that Alex Jones was right and that they're making the frogs gay?
I don't know if the frogs are gay, but I do know that like a lot of the
That was the meme that, that people were talking about because there's chemicals in the water, and he was going on a rant about how the chemicals in the water were they weren't really actually gay frogs, they were trans frogs, because it was that particular meme actually turned out to be true. They were finding frogs. There are hormones in the water that were basically causing the frogs. I guess frogs can actually transition between male and female, and it was causing the male frogs to turn female. So that's why he was saying they were gay frogs. But I just thought that was funny.
That is funny. I don't know where we were left off in regards to that.
Well, we were talking about medical uses for different drugs, and we were talking about overprescribing antidepressants.
Yeah. So that's definitely something that needs to be worked on in this country, and marijuana, I feel, would alleviate that. Instead of looking at it as a gateway drug, look at it as an exit way drug, because a lot of people can get off the chemical concoction combinations that they're on. I would advise people to look up this guy named Al Harrington. He's an NBA basketball player, and he became a pro marijuana advocate because he was done with his NBA career, and his trainer or a doctor or therapist came by his house and noticed all the medicines he was taking because of his knee injuries. He got an infection, and then he had more operations. So she was like, "You ever try to think of CBDs to get rid of the inflammation and swelling?" And the rest,
CBD oil.
And the rest
I've read conflicting information about CBD, because some people say that it works great, and I've had some people say that it doesn't do anything.
Well, for a lot of people, it does work, and just like many other things, some people it's going to have the full effect, and some people won't have the.
I know people personally who have tried it and have said that it didn't really help them at all. So.
Okay, well, that was their experience with it, but it's a lot of people.
But they say that, taking let's say edibles that have THC in them.
Okay, helps them out. Okay.
With THC, with CBD oil and everything.
But the thing is, it's like people that are documented from people that take glaucoma or have glaucoma or have other chronic diseases that cause them chronic pain, and that are able to get rid of those medications because they are now on marijuana. Those things have been documented. So, those people are being helped. It can't help everyone, but the people it does help, you can definitely see in the fact that they're no longer taking all the medications that they needed to keep them alive, and that they've got, used CBD or marijuana or THC.
One thing that I find very interesting, that I would like to learn a little bit more about, there's a lot of people in the scientific community, mainly people who work with the brain, so like neuroscientists and psychologists and things like that are I wouldn't say advocating, but basically they're toying with psychedelics, because they're saying that there's potential therapeutic uses for psychedelics, and that psychedelic experiences can have positive impacts on your life long term. So, for instance, people who have suffered post-traumatic stress or suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome and other psychological problems, let's say anxiety or depression, that they can actually overcome a lot of those issues long term through the therapeutic use of a psychedelic experience, preferably with a psychologist or somebody to help guide you through the experience. What do you think about that?
I've heard about it, and I would say, as long as, it's an alternative, it's something different, and if there's positive, if the patient
I was surprised that I've heard a lot of I've heard quite a few psychologists talking in different documentaries and videos I've watched on YouTube, with these clinical psychologists out there talking about psychedelics and saying that they think that there's beneficial uses for them.
Absolutely.
And it seems a little it seems a little strange. It's something that you probably wouldn't have heard of 20, 30 years ago, but now people are openly talking about, people who are credible, scientists and doctors talking about, hey, there might be a medical use for psychedelics.
No, absolutely. It's positive to hear that, and it's good that they're actually exploring this on a scientific basis. And that's bottom line is that's all I want is the fact that for the truth to come out, and if that's one of the truths that it can help out people deal.
They're saying that it helps you basically have a moment of clarity.
Yeah.
Or helps you overcome traumatic experiences.
Yeah. I mean,
you're able to relive, like somebody who has post-traumatic stress is able to tap into those dark memories
and then be able
and it overcome
process them
during the psychedelic experience.
I mean, the post-traumatic stress that we suffer in this country is like based on the war on drugs. Again, the war on drugs is a war on people, and the first casualty of war is the truth. And you've got to remember that, like, in order for them to justify having a war, might makes right is the fact that they've got to make it public enemy number one. And the marijuana plant should have never been public enemy number one. It should have been something that we, is used as a resource, because we could have been so much further ahead in the world as far as, using it as a green technology, as for food, fuel, fiber, clothing, so it's like this whole fossil fuel, chemical, petrol-based, carbon existence that we have right here could have been something that's renewable, sustainable, and actually able to, be a cleaner, pollution-free kind of product that we're producing if we could produce hemp plastics, hemp fuels, polymers, and things of that nature. So it's the reason why it should be legal is not just the fact that, there's recreational use, but the real money is in all the industrial uses that you can get out of the plant. It's
well, I don't know if you're going to convince everybody with your arguments, but some might. Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, maybe you can tell people a good source where they can read about, advocacy and read about opinions that you have. Okay. What's a good source to read up on it?
I would say many good places to actually get more information would be NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I don't know if High Times is still around, but they were a good place for me to get.
Wasn't that like a magazine or a website?
Yeah, it's a magazine. I don't know if it's a website now. There's, I think Green Times or Colorado Times. There's, in YouTube, just everything, anything you want to learn, type it in onto YouTube, learn how to build a generator, solar panel, learn how to take care.
You can learn how to do anything on YouTube.
Anything on YouTube.
You can learn how to speak a language,
yes.
Guitar lessons.
Everything. So
you can hear poor quality podcasts.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, whatever what floats your boat. I call it YouTube University. You can either master fate or masturbate on that thing.
There you go.
So I do both.
Speaking of which, you and I should do a little bit sometime soon. Maybe do a little comedy video.
I'm post it up. So, but no, I'd also want to come back and try to talk about why I became an ordained minister and why I do life insurance, because those are I do stand.
Yeah, we didn't really get to talk about any of that.
I definitely want to talk about why I do those things as
well.
well.
Where can people find out more about you? So you're a comedian.
Yeah, my name is Rhodes Pierre. That is RHODES, and the last name is Pierre, PIERRE. And just Google me, Facebook.
Is there anywhere people can find out more information about your comedy, or maybe if somebody wants to get married, they can contact you?
Yeah, they can definitely contact me, through the old internet there, the
interwebs.
The interwebs, okay. Rhodes.pierre@gmail. That's my email address. And then, anything, like I said, I'd definitely like to talk about.
I'll put your contact information up.
That'll be awesome, yeah, because, like I said, I definitely want to talk to people about both of those things, the ordained ministry.
So if anyone's looking for life insurance,
yes,
or you need to hire a stand-up comedian,
yes,
or get married and maybe do them all at once,
yes.
You're getting married, you need someone to,
give you some financial advice, get you some life insurance.
So he can marry you,
make you laugh, and
give you insurance, and perform at the wedding reception.
Yes.
There you go.
I provide assurance for your insurance, I say.
There you go.
I got you for this life and the afterlife.
All right. I'd like to thank Rhodes Pierre for coming on today and having a discussion with us, and I hope to have you back on sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime, Stephen.
Steven.
Okay. Mr. Norton.
Bye.